A very interesting song. He calls it If You Know Love. And the reason why I'll be playing that song would be a little bit obvious, wouldn't it? We're discussing today paternity fraud and the menace that it is in our society today. It is a very serious situation, okay? Now, in the past couple of years, um, you know, Nigeria's online space has been in it has been filled with stories of men finding out that they aren't the real fathers of their children, uh, especially children that they've raised, some even into adulthoods. It's very safe to say that this is the era of paternity fraud. Now, paternity fraud is a situation where a woman deliberately misidentifies her husband as the biological and legitimate father of a child. Okay, in most cases, women are often aware that the presumed biological father is not genetically linked with with the child. Men usually find out they are not the true fathers of their presumed children on suspicion of infidelity, or and of course by, conducting a paternity test. Right. Exactly. Now, in the realm of relationships and family dynamics, a very painful and intricate issue looms over the unsuspecting individuals. It's called paternity fraud. And at its core, paternity fraud involves the deceitful misattribution, like I said earlier, of a child's biological father, often leading to profound emotional and legal ramifications. This disheartening phenomenon challenges the very foundation of trust and raises important questions about personal identity, also about legal responsibility, and so much more. Okay? Of course, including the well being of the parties involved. Now, today we intend to delve into the depths of this complex subject, and we aim to shed light on the various aspects of paternity fraud, navigating the intricate webs woven by the human heart and the quest for truth and justice in such delicate matters. To join me in this conversation, I have a legal practitioner, barrister Kevin Asekome. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you in the house.
The pleasure is mine.
All right. Let's get into the conversation proper, shall we? Paternity fraud. You're a legal practitioner. Can you explain what paternity fraud is and how you think it impacts individuals and families that are involved?
Well, as the name implies, paternity fraud is a situation where a woman ascribes the paternity of a child to a particular person, in most cases her husband, with the full knowledge that that man is not the biological father of that child. It is very different from a situation where the mother does not know, probably because she had more than one person that they were into a relationship with, and somehow she has relations with the 2, 3, or 4 men, as the case may be, and she gets pregnant. In that situation, she may not be able to know exactly who
The father.
amongst those men she has had relations with is the father of the child. In that situation, it cannot be outrightly said to be paternity fraud, because even the woman itself did it from a position of ignorance. Now, narrowing it down to the paternity fraud situation, under Nigerian law, any child born within the pendency of a marriage is presumed to be for the husband in that marriage until credible evidence is brought to rebut that presumption.
Okay. We've had. Okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying here is, once a child is born in a marriage, the presumption that arises is that that child is for the man, for the husband. But if along the line, credible evidence, not just evidence, credible evidence is brought to show that that man is not the father of the child, that's where the issue of paternity fraud will now arise. So that, in a nutshell, is what paternity fraud is.
Now, we've had situations where you would hear that, or before I even go to that, let's ask this some of these basic questions. Are there, what are the common signs or red flags that might suggest that, the possibility of paternity fraud?
Yeah, well, the red flags, basically, it comes up when maybe a child has health challenges which are alien to the family of the man. If, for example, a man's family doesn't have the genetic trait of epilepsy, and the child now develops epilepsy,
Yeah.
it's a hereditary defect.
Okay.
Now, that will raise the possibility, where did this child get it from? And if in the mother's family that gene is also absent, that's where questions will start to be asked.
Okay.
Because in every human being gets his or her genetic traits from either the father or the mother. So if there is an alien genetic trait found in that child, it raises the possibility that that child may not be for the father. Another issue where the red flag will be raised when such happens is where maybe the blood group of the child differs from that of the father. Because in most situations, the blood groups of parent and children ought to be compatible. But in a few situations, it's discovered that the child has a different blood group to that of the father. That may raise the suspicion that, something went wrong somewhere. So also, when you are talking about genotypes, that is even the most common situation where suspicion could be raised. We all have genotype AA, genotype AS, genotype SS. Now, if somebody with AA marries somebody with AS, definitely the worst they can get is a child with an AS trait. But if you now see in a situation where the parents are AA, or one of them is AS and one of them is AA, and they now give birth to a sickler, obviously questions will be asked, because it is a genetic impossibility for a child from such people to develop the sickle cell gene. So mostly those are the common areas where suspicion arises. In more complex situation, maybe somebody else might show up claiming the paternity of the child. It happens.
Yeah, that happens too.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of drama, isn't it?
So much drama. That is where you some people have to even go to court, and the court may order that a test be carried out to determine amongst the two men who the real father is. And once it is discovered that the husband, that the other man contesting the paternity of the child is the real father of the child, means that the mother has perpetrated paternity fraud, except if she can give enough reasons to show that she did not deliberately do it.
What kind of reasons would that be?
Yeah, just as I said, when you're into multiple relationships, and maybe after then you now get married to one of those people you were in a relationship with, not knowing that maybe you got pregnant for somebody else before you married the other person. Or a situation where, she didn't even know that she was pregnant before she went into the marriage, and then when the pendency of the marriage, maybe 1 or 2 months after the wedding, she discovers she's pregnant. Definitely, to her own mind, it will seem as if it's her husband that has the pregnancy. But if somebody else shows up, maybe the person is so certain that she got pregnant for him, and he shows up, if she can say, well, I didn't really know I was even pregnant before I got married. Though that is a very lame excuse, but it's an excuse anyway. Because it's almost impossible for a woman not to know
Who the father of the child.
who the father of her child is. Or it is almost impossible for a woman not to know that she was pregnant at a particular time before getting married.
Some people would argue that because, some medical personalities will tell you that a woman can be pregnant for a while as long as 6 months. And not
Wow.
know. Yes.
Well, I'm not a doctor.
I don't know.
I will not join issues with you on that. But logically speaking, it's almost impossible for a woman not to know
generally
that she's pregnant.
Okay, I want us to take a very quick breather here. I'm going to be playing us a little sort of this happened in paternity court, and we got this. A man spent 5 years in jail for not paying, child support. And the woman knew that he wasn't the father, and she knew all of that. Let's just play this. Listen to the entire thing. It's about 8 minutes long, and we'll be right back to continue the conversation. This is, of course, Matters on Voice of the People, 96.1 FM Abuja.
Unusual punishment to be sentenced to 5 years in prison with rapists and murderers and child molesters for missing a court date.
The following video contains clips that were used under fair usage. No copyright infringement was intended. Welcome back to the Barrington Academy, home of intellectual discussions. Today, we bravely decide to review a paternity court case between a man who served 5 years in prison for failing to pay child support and a woman who knowingly allowed the man to spend 5 years in prison knowing fully well he is not the father. Stay tuned to the end when we provide a surprising revelation not presented throughout the court case. According to the gentleman, Nick Henschel, father of Elizabeth's son, Bill at the time did not show up for court. Hence, the court named him father by default, resulting in him going to jail for failure to pay child support.
That's basically what happened. I missed a court date.
By failing to turn up to court, the lopsided system deemed him the father, destroying his life.
So I didn't show up for court, and I was named the natural father by default.
And then what happens?
And then I was charged criminally for not paying the child support that was ordered in the default judgment.
What makes this case stands out in the consciousness of the viewers is the duplicity of Elizabeth's action and the length that she went to pin a child on Bill that was not his.
Are you convinced he is the father?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
Because I have had a DNA test done and I have the results right here. Would you like a copy of it?
Stop it. Get some help.
At this point in the case, viewers would be on her side and would have been disgusted at Bill for denying paternity, especially when the DNA proves that he is the father of the child in question.
Here, I see the laboratory results of the testing with a probability of paternity of 99.67%.
Well, you're the
Do you
second
know, man,
person.
that he said 99.67 means he still might not be the father when he heard that number?
Furthermore, Bill started to dispute the validity of the results of the DNA test, which at this point further irate the viewers who were on Elizabeth's side. The judge didn't seem to buy his rebuttal, and you could see from her attitude in the next clip that she was annoyed at Bill.
I still don't have
Well,
proof.
once you don't show up for court,
Right.
Mr. Mansur, yeah.
I guarantee you there's
you
thousands-
understand that now, that in this country, you've got to show up for court.
Well-
If you got to walk there. The pain that you've endured and what you've gone through is in part because...
My stubbornness.
Thank you.
Yeah, my stubbornness.
And you are a living example of
Right.
that.
However, it didn't take long for the judge to see through her bull. She admitted to working at a plasma center and indicated that her work had nothing to do with DNA. The judge noticed that the DNA results document was incomplete, missing the name of the father, his address, his photo, and his social security number. Yet, Elizabeth was postulating the narrative that the assertions that Bill was the father were supported by the science of a DNA test. This was a clear indication that Elizabeth was a crafty and dangerous individual who was not above committing fraud to establish a truth that was nothing more than a facade. She went as far as providing a sample to the laboratory, claiming that the sample came from Bill, which would paint Bill as the biological father. The results suggested that he was 99.67% the father of the child in question. However, as stated earlier, the DNA results provided no information on the father or any information on the collection of the sample. Meaning, therefore, if a sample was provided, anyone could have been the father of the child in question. Me, you, Barack Obama, or even this guy from Family Guy.
God, everybody, this handsome, muscular boy is Brian's son.
Elizabeth was not only deceitful, fraudulent, and conniving, she was manipulative, as you can see in the next clip.
I feel like I have never ever deserved disrespect. I was not the woman that showed up at your doorstep every 2 months. You're gonna be my baby's daddy. I have never disrespected you. I
You
let
didn't
you
have to,
be and live
prosecutor
your
did.
life and live your selfish life you've lived for the last 20 years.
At this point, it was possible for a few of the viewers to still be on her side, based on her brilliant acting skills. However, the results changed everything.
Answer. You are not
Oh, God.
his father.
There is a special place.
And so we hear a story of a woman, we hear a story of a man who had to spend 5 years in prison over child support payments that he didn't make on a child that isn't his. And what hurts, anybody that hears this, what hurts the most about the story is that, the woman falsified a DNA test result. So she knew there's nothing more deliberate than this in this situation. There's nothing more deliberate than this situation. She knew that this was not this man was not the father of the child. She possibly went to the father of the child, took samples from the father of the child and used it for a DNA test, just to do that. In that kind of situation, say someone finds himself in an obvious situation where he has been wrongly accused of paternity fraud or of running away from responsibility and has been charged to court and has even been convicted. Let's start with the question, what are the legal implications of paternity fraud?
I'll base my answer on what obtains in, I won't say more civilized societies here, but what obtain in Western democracies. Paternity fraud is a very serious issue over there, and is always taken very, very seriously because just like in this clip, if you are the father of a child and maybe you are divorced, you have to support that child, and failure to support the child is a criminal offense for which you could go to jail. And when somebody now willingly and maybe maliciously now ropes you into that kind of situation where you are seen to be the father and you are not paying child support and you are sent to prison. As the case turned out now, the man has so many legal remedies open to him. He could sue for damages, maybe you can even sue the county, sue the woman, sue all those that participated in the forgery. And those that participated in the forgery will also have to answer to the state in criminal charges for falsifying such information. And the implications are very, very rife. Coming down home, the implication of paternity fraud is that you end up bringing up a child that turns out not to be yours. It's very, very psychologically damaging. For a child you have invested so much love, care, attention, time and resources on, one day somebody just an issue comes on and you find out that the child is not yours. It's very, very demoralizing. And it could lead to very serious psychological consequences. Some men commit suicide when things like that come. Or the children might want to harm themselves because how do they live with the shame that, okay, this man I've been calling my father for this long is not actually my father. So it ends up parties affected by paternity fraud are always damaged psychologically and mentally. And it might lead to either antisocial behavior in the future, or it might lead to depression to the extent it becomes manic depression. And we know what the consequence of manic depression is.
Yeah.
It may lead to suicide, it may lead to murder, it may lead to
A lot of
inflicting
things.
serious harm on yourself or others.
Absolutely.
So the implications are very, very grave, and such acts ought to be discouraged at everything.
No, like I said in my opening, paternity fraud has become very prevalent. It's becoming more and more common. A lot of people are becoming more aware of what it is, and we are seeing more stories pop up left, right, and center. Now, before we came on air, I was having a conversation with you, and you said there are some reasons why people would not want to, go to court after they found out, or pursue, legal redress over this wrong. Are there any societal or cultural factors that would contribute to the prevalence of paternity fraud, and how does this issue vary across, the different regions we have here in the country?
If you recall, at the beginning of this interview, I said something. I said the law presumes any child born during the pendency of any marriage as being for the father until credible evidence is brought to rebut that presumption. Now, this issue of paternity fraud, I won't say it's new, but it is now that people are becoming aware of the possibility of paternity fraud and are willing to investigate and see if they are victims or not. Because in those days, once a child is born and the woman points to somebody and says, "This is the father," everybody goes home. Even the man fingered will not even have the courage to deny and say, "I am not." And even in a situation where he does deny, his family pressurize him into accepting the pregnancy. Simply because they don't want the shame of, okay, you impregnated a lady, you are denying. My friend, this child is for you. Whether I like it or not, this child is for you. You understand?
Yes.
Now, but recently, people are beginning to ask questions. People are beginning to, feel less comfortable about just accepting any child brought their way. That is why you see these days we now start having all these issues that's been with us. Now, why issues of paternity fraud may not end up in court in this part of the world is that our society has this notion of, family pride, family reputation. Okay, if you now go to court, all the dirty secrets you have will be brought to the public, and everybody will know that maybe your wife slept around, maybe you know that maybe you were biologically incapable of fathering a child. No, there's so many issues. So that discourages many parties from coming out to ventilate their grievances as regards to paternity fraud. Let me give you an example. Mr. A discovers that the child born to him by Mrs. A is not his child. If he goes to his family, more often than not, his family will tell him to keep quiet. That it is not proper for him to come out and now make noise about it. Or they might decide, okay, fine, since you know that child is not, quietly give the child to the woman to take to whoever is the father. So many of these cases slip under the radar without the society knowing about. There's very few cases, maybe celebrity cases, that you don't start hearing, this child is not for this person. This person was more biologically incapable of giving birth to a child. I had to go outside to sleep with somebody, and there is something we are forgetting here. There are even situations where the man is an accomplice in the issue. There are examples like that.
A man can be an accomplice in
Yes.
being defrauded?
No, when I say being an accomplice, there are some men that know that they are biologically incapable of fathering children. They might tell their wives to secretly go out and get pregnant and then bring the children home. But where such issues backfire is when the real father of the child decides to claim his child. That is where the issues start arising, and in such situation, the husband now becomes an accomplice because the other person he's also being defrauded, because if he has a child and is deliberately prevented from knowing that he has a child somewhere and he finds out on his own, he's a victim. So there are cases like that. So because of that, the society we live in is quick to suppress such issues because of the family pride or the family reputation or the reputation of the man or the woman, as the case may be, because most often than not, such issues bring out hidden secrets. Or the woman may decide to say, I did this because this man was this or this man was that.
Oh, which is leading us to the next question I wanted to ask you. What are the main contributors of paternity fraud, especially in Nigeria?
Well, in Nigeria, the main issue of paternity, the main major contributors of paternity fraud is when a mother, a prospective mother in this case, desperately seeks a father for a child she got either illegally outside the marriage, or maybe before the marriage she got pregnant and she needs a father for her child. Then secondly, there might be a situation where, as I just explained, the husband knows he's biologically incapable of fathering children, and he now solicits his wife to go and get pregnant outside, and then so that they can have children. And thirdly, it might be maybe the woman wants to spite the biological father of the child by denying him the child, because there is an adage in my blood that only a woman knows the father of her child. And once she says this is the father of her child, she is rarely questioned. So I think those three issues are the major contributors to paternity fraud in our society.
I mean, we've seen several celebrity stories where, you know, there are so many top celebrities that have been victims of paternity fraud.
Yes.
One of them would be Duncan Mighty.
Yes.
We've seen, you know, he actually let people know on Instagram when he said that he shared his experience on a very lengthy post. He said that a DNA test established that his daughter Misha wasn't his, and accused his wife of cheating on him and attempting to, you know, harm him in order to seize his money.
Yes.
Another one that was very popular was Nedu. Nedu made allegations in response to his ex-wife because she was accusing him of, you know, domestic violence, and he came out and said, oh no, if there was anybody that suffered from domestic violence in the course of this marriage, it was me. And besides that, you pinned, you know, 2 children on me that were not, you know. He revealed in a post, he said our marriage was plagued with a lot of issues, one of which was continuous infidelity from her side. That led me to conducting paternity tests on our kids, which led to the revelation that our first son is not my biological son.
Yes.
His wife, however, responded saying that she was not aware of the paternity of their first child until the DNA was conducted. And she argued that vehemently. In fact, one of the things she said was, I remember at the time, she said, oh, he didn't ask me who the father of the child was as at the time. And a lot of Nigerians criticized that and said, you tell a man that you are engaged to marry, that you are pregnant, and you expect him to ask you, oh, whose pregnancy is this? You understand me now. Another one would be Laile Bakare, who she put, this was in 2013. The child's legitimacy was questioned as two men claimed ownership of the baby she gave birth to. Just 1 month after her breakup with her ex-husband, Olumide Okun Fulire. Concerned by the situation, the ex-husband responded to the information by claiming paternity of the child. He said, I'm just going to quote this because this was quite dramatic too in the time. He said, I heard my wife delivered a baby boy barely 2 months after she made a release that we were divorced. And she's saying the baby belongs to one Mr. Tunde Oriwo. That's a lie, a very wicked lie. I am the biological father. I have pictures to show that we were always together, but she deliberately kept the pregnancy out of my knowledge. In other words, it might be a result of her extramarital affair without my knowledge, because there were cases that she would leave me and our daughter in the US and come to Nigeria, all in the name of promoting her movies, but staying with married men in Lagos. I couldn't monitor her because I was not always in Nigeria. Now, this was very funny. Mostly, when things like this happen, you would find out men are running away from the men are saying, oh, that's not my child, that's okay. But in this situation, there were two men that were saying, no, this is my child, and it was very funny. Have you experienced situations like that in your work?
Yes, it happens. You see, when a child is born in marriage, I always said the child is presumed to be for the husband of the marriage. But if there is a rival claim now to that child, the law looks at it that the child is for the husband until the person claiming paternity brings up strong evidence to show that, look, I am the father of that child. It's a different thing when a woman, an unmarried woman now, gets pregnant and she decides to say, this child is for so person. That is an unmarried woman now. It is now that man cannot claim that child to be his unless credible evidence to show that child is actually his, because there is no marriage between them. If there is no dispute, no problem. But if there is a dispute, then evidence must be led. And you see, in these cases, the only few cases I've seen that had transcended the family level down to the court level are a situation where the husband is insisting that the children are his, as opposed to somebody else from outside claiming that the children are his. Now, that is in that case, maybe we have to go to the court to settle the issue, and the court usually orders a DNA test.
DNA tests are usually very expensive. It's not easily affordable, so to speak. When the court orders DNA testing, who foots the bill?
Well, ordinarily is the party that needs the evidence to prove the paternity of the child in his favor, and normally foots the bill. But sometimes the court might order the parties to share the bill, since any result from the test will affect every party. So all parties are always encouraged to contribute towards it. But ordinarily, it is the party that is seeking to prove the paternity of the child that normally does the DNA test.
Now, some people would say that in a situation where some people are going to say that, sometimes in order to save men the stress of raising a child that isn't yours, and save everybody the emotional trauma, considering that we have reports that have been making rounds that Nigeria has the second highest rate of paternity fraud in the entire world.
Yes.
Some people would say that it would be a wise decision to just include DNA testing immediately after childbirth.
Yes, but there's no legal backing for such. As it is now, that kind of practice can only be an option. A father might decide that at birth a DNA test be carried out on the child to know if the child is actually his. That's an option. But legally, there's no legal framework supporting that.
Would
that
you
action.
encourage? Is it something you would encourage?
Yes, it should be encouraged because, as I said, the trauma accompanying paternity fraud is so grave that it will do the world a lot of good if such issues are discovered at birth, so that you know from the birth of the child, you know whether the child is yours, or if it's not yours, if you now decide, okay, I want to adopt the child, that's a different kettle of fish entirely. So I want, maybe with time, we'll encourage developing a legal framework for such things. And one thing that I will militate about it, just as I say, is the high cost of the DNA test. A family that is earning an income of below 500,000 a year now, I don't think they have that kind of money to conduct a DNA test, except if it becomes a law that it is the state that should conduct such tests for the families, because the issue also affects the state, because when the antisocial behavior starts coming up after all this is discovered, it affects not just the parties involved, but probably the society at large. So I think it is something worth exploring. We should explore that option of maybe legalizing DNA tests at the point of birth.
Okay.
So that maybe all these issues of paternity fraud will reduce. And you mentioned something very interesting. Nigeria has the second highest rate of paternity fraud in the entire world. I don't know where the statistic came from, but you see, as I said, most paternity fraud cases are always swept under the carpet. They don't come into the public glare. Even when there's a very vivid example I got when growing up. There was this man, he had this child, he trained the child to university level, sent him abroad to study, and he started working there. All of a sudden, it now came out that he was not the biological father of that child.
Wow.
Having spent so much to train the child, and that thing led to the man dying early, had a heart attack shortly after, and died.
I remember hearing a similar story on social media. There was a young man who had been raised by his parents as he knew them, went abroad, established his life, wanted to move his family abroad. Then he had to do the compulsory DNA testing, and then he found out that he wasn't the son of his father. And he was very confused as to whether or not he should inform his father or have a conversation with his mother about it, or just leave the matter to die down. He didn't know what to do. Took to social media to ask people for what they thought that he should do. And this is an issue that we see come up every single time. It's very common. It's becoming even more common as the day comes. Now, a lot of people say that some of the reasons why paternity fraud is rising will be maybe ignorance, traditional beliefs, stigma of childless marriage. Put us through some of the reasons why you would think that it is rising.
Why I feel it is rising is that the level of awareness now about this issue of paternity is higher than before. It has always been with us. Let us not get that wrong. Paternity fraud has always been with us, but we have not really been bothered about maybe taking an extra step to find out about the paternity of the children we have. But these days, it has started becoming more of an issue, and with time, more and more cases will come into the social consciousness because of this issue of social media. You see most of these stories we see of paternity fraud, we get them from the social media, because maybe the victims want to go and ventilate their pain on their respective social media handles and the thing becomes viral, that will now lead to other people taking a second look at the children they have to say, since Mr. A has discovered that, well, this child is not his, how am I sure that mine
is mine?
are mine? So we will now be having a larger occurrence or a larger exposure of these issues. That is why I'm advocating for a stronger legal framework to curtail this menace. If you know that if you engage in paternity fraud, there's a form of punishment or sanction that awaits you, I don't think many women will be many people will be really interested in perpetrating it, because right now, I'm sorry to say this, but right now there is no sanction, no legal sanctions, except maybe the victim of the paternity fraud decides to claim damages for the stress he has been put through, the resources he has expended, and the psychological damage it has done to his reputation. You can claim damages based on that. But for you say maybe the perpetrator will be arrested and then prosecuted, the legal
It has
framework
not been criminalized?
It has not been criminalized, because I told you it's just a recent phenomenon in this country. It has been with us, but nobody has really taken notice. It is now that it has come into our consciousness, and maybe we will now start an advocacy to ensure that it is criminalized, so that to deter so many people from going into it. If a woman knows that, well, if it is discovered that this child is not from Mr. B, I'll be punished, they might be very cautious about
infidelity.
Infidelity, one, or ascribing paternity to just anybody. But I will tell you for free, there are some women that do it deliberately. Maybe the actual father of the child is not well to do, or they feel he cannot really take care of them. They now give the pregnancy to somebody who is who is in affluence, so that their children have a secured future. It happens. So if it is criminalized, such people might want to rethink before they engage in such.
Okay, this has been a very interesting conversation. We've been talking with Barrister Kelvin Asakome about, paternity fraud in Nigeria, especially, and how it has become very prevalent. This has been so interesting. We have about 3 minutes before we round off from the studio. Can you please tell us in 2 minutes the ways forward, basically your closing?
Yes. In conclusion, I want to say that the issue of paternity fraud, if not tackled, will grow to become a monster that we may not be able to tame in the future. That is why, as I said earlier, there should be a framework, a legal framework now, designed to curtail this incidence of paternity fraud. Maybe prescribe sanctions for such conduct. Maybe a prison term, an option of fine, even community service, so that those people who are into it will be named and shamed, and others looking at them will not want to be in that situation. And secondly, our society has to change its mindset about maybe paternity. It is not a given that once a woman says, "This is the father of my child," she should be believed without question. There should be a mechanism to check, investigate, ascertain. Okay, yes, this woman is claiming that it is actually the child of the person she says it is. That is the only way we can tame this growing monster, as I call it.
Yeah,
it's a growing monster now.
Absolutely.
And we don't want it to grow into maturity, because we might not be able to control it.
Well, thank you very much for coming to the studio and having this conversation with us. As we conclude this exploration into the intricate world of paternity fraud, I think it has become clear that the impact of such a deception has gone far beyond the mere legalities. It strikes at the very core of trust, identity, and family bonds. The emotional toll on every party involved cannot be overstated. I'm talking both the biological father, the father that was lied to, the woman that has the child, and even the child himself. By raising awareness, promoting open discussions like we've had, we do hope that we can pave a way for truth, justice, and healing. I do hope that this conversation today would serve as a catalyst for change, fostering a society that upholds integrity, empathy, and fairness, ultimately striving for the well-being and happiness of all individuals and families impacted by the complexities of paternity fraud. If you know anyone, you have any stories of anyone dealing with this, you can definitely reach out to us via any of our social media platforms. Would love to talk to you about it. Have first-hand experience, of course. It is at VOP961. You could also send us a message on WhatsApp on 0700 961. It's been a very beautiful episode of Formula U. Of course, In the Streets comes right after. Stay with us.